All right, let's dive into one of the most incredible stories you'll hear in religious tradition, the splitting of the moon by the Prophet Muhammad. It's this powerful, iconic image, a defining miracle for so many people. But what if the foundational text, the Qur'an itself, tells a completely different story? Let's take a closer look. So, the story, as it's often told, is just epic, right? You've got the skeptics in Mecca, and they're demanding a sign, a real, undeniable miracle to prove that Muhammad is who he says he is. And in response, he just points, and the moon splits in two. One half on one side of a mountain, the other half on the other, before it snaps back together. I mean, talk about a spectacle. Okay, and this is where our whole investigation really kicks off. The source material we're digging into today presents a pretty bold claim. Not only does this story not appear in the Quran this way, but the Quran actually systematically argues against the Prophet performing these kinds of physical, show-stopping miracles. So, first things first, we have to scrutinize the idea of miracles itself. What does the Quran, on its own terms, say about its messenger performing these incredible physical acts? We're just going to follow the trail of textual evidence laid out in our source. And this is the central thesis, the big idea we're exploring. The argument isn't just that the Quran is kinda silent on the topic. No, it's that the text actively and repeatedly builds a case that the Prophet's job was something else entirely, that his real authority came from the message he delivered, not from, bending the laws of physics. So, let's get into the first line of evidence our source brings up. It's a pattern, a kind of reoccurring theme that it calls the only a warner rule. You'll see this pop up whenever people in the text demand a miracle, and the answer they get is, well, it's a very specific and limiting job description. Okay, look closely at how this is structured. You have a direct demand, show us a sign. And the immediate response isn't a sign, it's a correction. You are only a warner. The source we're looking at highlights that the Arabic word used here, innama, is really strong. It basically draws a line in the sand, saying the role of a warner and the role of a miracle worker are two different things. Now, what's fascinating here is the context of this verse. It comes right after his opponents list a whole bunch of things they want him to do. Make springs gush out of the ground, bring a piece of the sky down on them, literally climb up to heaven. And the response isn't to do any of it. It's to remind them of a boundary. It's this contrast. God's glory is one thing, but am I anything but a human messenger? It implies those kinds of acts are God's business, not a human's. Our source calls this the triple negation, and you can see why. It's just a systematic takedown of the very powers you'd need for traditional miracles. 1. I don't control God's treasures. 2. I don't know the unseen, the hidden reality. And 3. I'm not an angel. The only power that's claimed is the power to follow the revelation he's receiving. So when you pull back and look at the whole picture, you see this pattern, this recurring refrain. Over and over again, the text seems to anticipate this demand for a physical sign and consistently redirects the audience. It points them back to the message itself, even asking, almost rhetorically, hey, isn't this book enough of a sign for you? Okay, so with all of that foundation in place, let's circle back to the verse that started this whole thing, Surah 54, verse 1, which says, "The hour has drawn near and the moon has split." This table lays out the source's argument perfectly. First, that phrase, the hour, al-sa in Arabic, is like a technical term in the Quran. It almost exclusively refers to the day of judgment, the end of the world. Second, the past tense verb has split. Now get this. The source argues the Quran often talks about future apocalyptic events in the past tense to show how absolutely certain they are. It's a way of saying this is a done deal. And maybe most important of all, who does the splitting? No one. No human agent is mentioned at all. And this slide just hammers that point home. When the Quran talks about Moses splitting the sea, it's totally explicit. God tells him directly, strike the sea with your staff. The agency is crystal clear. But in the moon verse, the grammar is passive. The moon has split. It just happened. According to the source, that grammatical choice is a massive clue that we're talking about a cosmic event tied to the apocalypse, not a miracle performed by a person. All right, so that's the internal evidence from the text. Now let's step outside the book for a minute and look at what our source calls the silence of history. I mean, think about it. If the moon literally split in two in the sky, it would have been the single most spectacular astronomical event in all of human history. So, where are the records? The meticulous astronomers in China, India, the Byzantine Empire, they recorded everything. But on this, total silence. Geologically, the gravitational tidal waves would have been catastrophic. Again, nothing. And as for the modern claims that there are scars on the moon, well, NASA has been pretty clear that those lines, or rills, are ancient geological formations, not recent scars. Now, bringing it back to the text, the source points to this verse as a major theological problem for the traditional story. The Qur'an itself seems to say that God stopped sending these kinds of huge physical signs. Why? Because previous nations had rejected them, and that rejection led to their destruction. So to claim the prophet performed a sign just like those would be to argue against the Qur'an's own stated policy. All of this kind of forces us to take a step back and ask a more basic question. What do we even mean by the word miracle? Because the source material argues that the Qur'an has its own very specific and very different vocabulary for these things. So the word that pretty much everyone uses today for a sensory, physical miracle is mu'jiza. It implies something that just stops you in your tracks, something you can't possibly duplicate. But here's the bombshell, according to our source. That word, it is nowhere to be found in the Quran, not one time. It's a word from later Islamic tradition, not the foundational text itself. So what word does the Quran use? It uses the word ayah. Now, ayah is usually translated as sign, but it's more like a pointer. An ayah can be a supernatural event, for sure, like Moses' staff, but it can also be the sun rising, the moon, the cycle of night and day. Its job isn't just to make you go wow. Its job is to be a signpost pointing your mind toward a deeper reality. Okay, so if the big sign wasn't something physical, if it wasn't some kind of special effect in the sky, then what was it? And this brings us to the final and really the main conclusion of our source's argument. The whole argument boils down to this. The Qur'an proposes a radical shift in what a sign even is. It moves the great ayah for its final messenger away from being a spectacle that overwhelms your senses and toward being something intellectual, something linguistic, that challenges your mind. And here it is. This is the evidence for that shift. The ultimate challenge issued by the Qur'an multiple times isn't watch me do this incredible feat. It's, if you're in doubt, try to produce something like this text. The sign, the thing that is presented as being inimitable and miraculous, is the book itself. Its very structure, its language, its message, that is the proof. So we're left with this really powerful thought to chew on. By following the Qur'an's own internal logic, the source material suggests a totally different picture emerges, one based not on a prophet's power over the physical world, but on the power of a world-changing idea. And it leaves us with one final question. What if the greatest sign of all was never meant to be a spectacle for the eyes, but a text for the mind?